we're committed to knowing, loving, and following God and making his love known to others around us. Jesus said that we're to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, and with all of our mind, and we're to love our neighbor as ourselves. Relationships are important at the Bridge. And one of the ways that our spiritual growth is marked and demonstrated is by how we treat one another, how we relate to each other in the context of our group. Paul wrote in Ephesians to a group of first century Christians that he said, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling that you've received, to be completely humble and gentle, to be patient, bearing with one another in love, and making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bonds of peace. He went on to challenge these early Christians that they are to let the truths that they've been taught as Christians to begin to let those come out in the way they live. And then he said that we're to be made new in the attitude of our minds, and to put on a new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. One of the ways that we work this out in our church is by something we call the Heart Attitudes. A little booklet that we've put together describes what those are all about. They help us begin to discover how to enjoy relationships in a group. Now, attitudes are something that I can change. I can control my attitude. The other day, I was bored. I went through half of my day bored. And then I remembered about halfway through the afternoon that boredom is really an attitude. It's the way that I was looking at my life in relationship to the things that were going on around me. It was something that I could change. When I changed my attitude, I discovered that my boredom disappeared. There are lots of attitudes that we develop and live with all throughout our life. And these are some attitudes that are going to guide us as we build them into our lives. They're going to help direct the way we relate to one another. And we can enjoy some wonderfully healthy relationships that would honor Christ and honor one another. The attitude that is in my heart begins to guide the way I live my life out and the way I live my faith. And they're also going to guide the way I respond and enjoy my relationships with others around me. So we're going to spend the next several sessions looking at how we can enjoy our relationships in a group. I would like for us to go a little deeper in this discussion than we normally do in this sort of training. And I'd really like for us to begin to explore how we can implement these into our lives on a very practical basis. I think we'll discover as we go through these attitudes, these hard attitudes, that they are very practical in nature. But putting them into practice is going to be a challenge. These are commands from the Bible. Not only that, they're commands from God. The God who put life together and described and showed us what human life was all about. And as you interact with people in a group, you're going to deal with these issues, whether they're at church, or whether they're on your job, or whether they're when you're with your friends, or at home. Every time you deal with people in whatever kind of group, you're going to encounter these kinds of attitudes. Now, one of the main goals of our meetups is that we help people build healthy relationships in the context of Christian environment. As people begin to come into our group, they encounter what it really means to be Christian because of the way we relate to one another, and then the way we relate to our community and our world around us. And as you become part of our church, you're going to discover that these hard attitudes are going to become important to you. Now, half of these hard attitudes deal with personal relationships. Things like how I can live an open and honest lifestyle, or how to put the success and interests of others ahead of myself, or building and maintaining healthy relationships, or how I enjoy being together and faithfully serving the Lord together in those kinds of contexts. The rest of the hard attitudes address how I relate to the group as a whole. Like, am I willing to give and receive spiritual correction when necessary? Or am I willing to support the ministry with my finances, with my time, with my talents? And how to follow spiritual leadership within scriptural limits that God has set. These also speak of how we establish our church culture, what people are going to experience as they come around and become part of our church. And they also speak of how we as a church are going to relate to the rest of our community as a whole, how we treat other organizations. Now, all of these heart attitudes are built on a foundation. It's the first thing that we look at. Without a strong foundation, there's really not a lot we can build on. And the foundation for these heart attitudes is that we personally, individually, pursue and build this personal relationship that I have with Jesus Christ. That's where we'll start this first session, and I hope you enjoy this study, and I hope as we begin to work through this together, it builds a culture, a preference of the way we relate to one another that is healthy, Christ-centered, and brings honor to God. I wish you the very best as we endeavor this together.